My grandparents owned a cabin up in the mountains of Vermont that we would visit every winter break. The place was pretty isolated, about 20 minutes from the nearest town on winding mountain roads. My sister Emma and I loved going there because of all the snow and the huge backyard that stretched into dense pine forest. This happened when I was 9 and Emma was 12. We had arrived the night before during a massive snowstorm that had dumped almost 2 feet of fresh powder. The next morning, the snow was still falling steadily, and my parents were inside playing cards while Emma and I suited up to go build snow forts. Our favorite spot was this clearing, about 50 yards behind the cabin, where the trees opened up into a perfect circle. Emma decided we should have a competition to see who could build the better fort, so we picked opposite sides of the clearing and got to work. I was about halfway done with my fort when I heard Emma calling my name from across the clearing. But when I looked up, she was not there. Her half-built fort sat empty, and I could see her footprints leading away toward the tree line. I figured she had gone to gather more sticks or something, so I kept working. After another 10 minutes, I heard her voice again, but this time it sounded different, muffled somehow, and coming from deeper in the woods. She was calling, "Help me, come here," over and over. I dropped my shovel and started following the sound, tracking her footprints that led straight into the thick pine trees. The deeper I went, the darker it got under the canopy. The snow was not as deep here, but it was still coming down hard. Emma's voice kept calling to me, always seeming to come from just ahead, but I never caught sight of her. Her footprints were getting harder to follow in the dim light. Then I noticed something weird. There were other footprints alongside Emma's, bigger ones, adult-sized boots that seemed to be following the same path. My stomach dropped as I realized the voice calling my name did not quite sound like Emma anymore. It was similar, but off somehow, too deep, like someone trying to imitate her. I stopped walking and listened carefully. The voice called again, "Come find me, I am hurt." But now I was certain it was not Emma. The tone was wrong, and there was something unsettling about how it echoed through the trees. I started backing away, but then I heard real crying coming from a different direction. Following the sobbing, I found Emma crouched behind a massive fallen log about 30 yards away. She was shaking and had tears frozen on her cheeks. When she saw me, she grabbed my arm and whispered urgently that someone had been following her. She said a man in dark clothes had been walking behind her, always staying just out of clear sight between the trees. That is when we both heard the voice again, still calling my name, but now coming from where I had just been. We looked at each other in terror and started running back toward the cabin. Behind us, we could hear heavy footsteps crunching through the snow, getting closer. We burst out of the tree line and sprinted across the clearing, not stopping until we reached the back door of the cabin. Our parents took one look at our faces and knew something was seriously wrong. When we told them what happened, my dad immediately grabbed his rifle and went out to investigate while Mom called the local sheriff. Dad came back 20 minutes later, grim-faced. He had found the tracks we described, plus evidence that someone had been watching the cabin from the woods for a while. There were cigarette butts and trampled snow in several spots that gave clear views of our windows. The sheriff arrived an hour later with 2 deputies. They searched the entire property and the surrounding woods, but found nothing except more evidence of someone camping out there. Hay told us There had been similar reports from other cabins in the area over the past few weeks. We packed up and left that same day. My grandparents sold the cabin the following spring, and we never went back. Sometimes, I still wonder what would have happened if I had kept following that voice deeper into the woods, or if Emma had not been smart enough to hide when she did. That was the last winter we ever spent in that cabin. If you are still listening, turn off the lights, stay close to home, and do not follow voices into the woods. New stories drop without warning. Like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories. I have been snowboarding since I was 12 years old. My older brother Marcus got me into it, and by the time I turned 22, we were making annual trips to Colorado together. This particular trip was supposed to be special. We had saved up for months to stay at a high-end resort in Vail for a long weekend. We arrived on a Thursday night and hit the slopes first thing Friday morning. The conditions were perfect: fresh powder, clear skies, and not too crowded since it was midweek. Marcus and I spent the entire day exploring different runs, pushing each other to try more challenging terrain. On Saturday, we decided to venture out to some of the more remote trails. We took a chairlift to the top of the mountain and were planning our route when two women approached us. They introduced themselves as Katie and Lisa, and they were both incredibly attractive, the kind of women who seemed almost too perfect to be real. Katie was a redhead with bright green eyes and an infectious smile. Lisa was brunette, more reserved, but equally stunning. They were both excellent snowboarders, clearly experienced, and they seemed genuinely interested in riding with us. They claimed they were local instructors who knew all the best hidden runs that tourists never found. Marcus was immediately smitten. He had always been the more outgoing one between us, and having two beautiful women want to spend time with us was like a dream come true for him. I was more cautious, but I did not want to ruin his fun, so I went along with it. The women suggested we try a trail called Whiteout Ridge, which they said was an unmarked expert run that offered incredible views and untouched powder. They warned us it was challenging and that we would need to hike for about 20 minutes to reach the start, but they promised it would be worth it. We followed them away from the main trails, strapping our boards to our backs and trudging through deep snow. The farther we went, the more isolated we became. I started to feel uneasy when I realized we had been hiking for much longer than 20 minutes, and there were no other tracks in the snow, no evidence that anyone else had ever been where we were going. When I mentioned this to Katie, she laughed and said that was exactly the point. This was virgin territory, she claimed, known only to a few local experts. She pulled out a thermos of what she called high-altitude hot chocolate and insisted we all drink some to keep warm and maintain our energy for the challenging run ahead. The drink was rich and sweet, but there was an underlying bitter taste that seemed wrong. Marcus drank deeply, complimenting Katie on how good it was. I took a small sip and pretended to drink more, while actually letting most of it spill into the snow when no one was looking. Within minutes, I could tell something was affecting Marcus. His speech became slightly slurred, and he started stumbling in the snow. The women attributed it to altitude and exertion, suggesting we rest for a few minutes before continuing. I was starting to feel slightly dizzy myself, but nothing like what Marcus was experiencing. We reached what the women claimed was the top of Whiteout Ridge. The view was spectacular, but I was more concerned about Marcus, who was now having trouble standing upright. Katie and Lisa seemed overly attentive to him, supporting him and speaking in soothing voices about how the run would be gentle and easy. That is when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Lisa's jacket had come unzipped, and I could see inside there were zip ties, a small knife, and what looked like a syringe. These were not friendly local instructors. They were predators, and we were their targets. I pretended to be more affected by whatever they had given us than I actually was, stumbling and acting disoriented. The women seemed pleased with my condition and started discussing something in low voices. I caught fragments of their conversation, something about a cabin, about the others, and about how Marcus would fetch a good price. They told us the run started just ahead, beyond a small ridge. As we approached, I realized we were not at the top of a ski run at all. We were at the edge of a steep drop-off that led into dense fog. There was no groomed trail, no safe route down, just wilderness. That is when I saw the smoke rising from somewhere below us. Katie pointed toward it and said there was a warming hut down there where we could rest and warm up. She and Lisa offered to help Marcus, who was barely conscious at this point, navigate the steep terrain. I knew this was my last chance to act. I told them I needed to adjust my bindings and knelt down as if working on my snowboard. Instead, I quickly loosened my boots and stepped out of them entirely. When Katie asked what I was doing, I claimed I was having equipment problems and needed a moment to fix them. While they were focused on Marcus, I grabbed my board and started running back the way we had come. I heard them shouting behind me, but I did not look back. I ran through the deep snow in just my socks, my feet going numb almost immediately, but I did not care. I had to get help. It took me over an hour to make it back to the main trails, leaving a clear path in the snow that I prayed they would not follow. My feet were badly frostbitten by the time I reached the base lodge, but I immediately found Ski Patrol and told them everything. Image prompt, the rescue team found our tracks and followed them back to the ridge. But there was no sign of Marcus, Katie, Lisa, or anyone else. The area where they claimed the warming hut was located was empty forest. No cabin, no smoke, no evidence that anyone had ever been there. Marcus was never found. The police investigation lasted weeks, but they never identified Katie and Lisa, and they had no leads on where Marcus might have been taken. The official report suggested he had gotten separated from me and fallen into a crevasse or gotten lost in the wilderness. Despite my detailed account of what really happened, I lost 3 toes to frostbite and spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The physical scars healed, but the psychological ones never did. I have not been snowboarding since, and I probably never will again. Every time I see missing person reports from ski resorts, I wonder if those same women are still out there, still preying on unsuspecting visitors. The worst part is the guilt. I left my brother with those monsters to save myself. I tell myself there was nothing else I could have done, that staying would have just meant they got both of us, but it does not make the guilt any easier to bear. Sometimes I wake up at night wondering what happened to Marcus in those final moments, and wishing I had been brave enough to try to save him. That was the last time I ever went snowboarding. If you are planning a trip to the mountains, be careful who you trust, because not every trail leads you back. Some only take you deeper into the cold, and some you do not come back from at all. If this story chilled you like it did me, like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, not follow strangers into the trees.